Lab 11.4 Gen AI, using data analytics to investigate unusual overhead activity. This walkthrough is filmed using ChatGPT 5.3. Okay, first we're going to need to upload our data set. So navigate to wherever you have saved Lab 11.4 Gen AI data and open it. And also we're going to upload our first prompt, which is going to give a little bit of context for the data set, and also ask the Gen AI tool to provide some confirmation variables and the number of rows of data. So run that. The tool has successfully told you the variables that are in the data set as well as the number of rows. So now we know we can go forward and prompt the data. For our next prompt, we're going to ask for a table to analyze the data showing total costs by account type and year. We want to show that across the top of the table, and account type along the side, and nest the account within each account type, showing the expense totals in US dollars rounded to 2 decimal points. And it looks like it's produced it correctly. We've got the account type down the left side with account label, account specific account, nested within that, and then the total expenses for each year for each account showing in the table. So next, we're going to ask it to make pie charts for the overhead costs only. We want those pie charts to show the percentage of the total on each of the overhead accounts, and we want it to be broken up, showing each year separately. So it's produced what I've asked, but it's really jumbled. So I'm going to create another prompt to specifically ask it to only give me labels and results for the top 4 overhead costs. So please revise the pie charts to only show labels, amounts, and percentages of the total for the 4 largest accounts. And I also ask for a table reporting the totals for all accounts, so I can still have all the data that I need, but only visualize the most significant. This looks a little bit better, but I still have overlapping labels, so I'm going to try one more time. So my next prompt says, please reproduce the pie charts, but make sure the labels aren't overlapping. Okay, so this isn't exactly what I was expecting, but it actually looks pretty good. I can tell clearly which account is associated with which color, and this actually makes it easy to see. So this works. Next, I'm going to ask for a heat map that summarizes the expense by supplier for each year. And I specify that the suppliers with the highest expenses should be dark red, and those with the lowest expenses should be bright green. So I see that it has produced something like a heat map, but it has given me different colors. And also you can see here that it's identifying the one outlier, paychecks, but it is not actually providing a meaningful heat map. So let's try that again. In my next prompt, I'm asking it to revise the heat map to show each summed expense as currency, and also to show more variation in color so that there's a spectrum from bright green at the lowest amount to bright red at the highest amount. So this looks better. I have my expense summarized, and I also have my colors, green and red instead of purple as before, but it's still showing me everything green except for the one outlier. So that's really not working for what I'm going to try to what I really want it to show me. So I'm going to specify some rules and specifically tell it to break my expenses into 5 categories, with the highest at bright red, the highest 20% at bright red, the next 20% is orange, and so on until we get to the lowest 20%, which will be bright green. Before, I hadn't really given it any criteria to differentiate, and I guess it just couldn't. So we'll see what comes now that I've given it specifics. Okay, now I have something that looks more like what I wanted. So I can still see where the highest expenses are and the lowest expenses are, and then there's variation in the middle. So next, we're going to prompt the system to tell it that management would like to examine any supplies vendors that seem to have unusual activity. So based on this heat map, which vendors would I want to examine further? We aren't giving it any real criteria. We're just saying what looks unusual. And my AI is generating a list of vendors to examine further, and it's explaining what the potential red flags are. So for Pierre, for example, it looks like there's been no activity and then a rapid increase in spend. That's possibly because it's a new vendor, or perhaps there's some reason that we stopped using them or did not use them in 2023, but then started using them later. So you can look through the results that your AI provides. It's also possible that your AI may just give you criteria to use to examine the data yourself. If so, you might need to specify and require it to generate vendors for your examination. Next, I'm going to ask it to create a column chart showing the number of transactions for each of the 5 vendors selected by year, organized so that it shows the columns clustered, the years clustered by vendor, and then the number of transactions at the top of each column. This will help me determine if the differences in total sales makes sense and is reflective of the difference in the number of sales. Okay, and I've got a chart that is built here. It does do what I want it to do. It's a little jumbled, so I might want to give ChatGPT some additional instructions. I'm going to ask it to change the color of the different years, and I'm also going to ask it to work on the spacing a little bit. So the prompt I've added here says make each year a different color and add a legend specifying the color associated with each year. Make sure the labels on the x-axis do not overlap. Okay, and there we have a chart that looks much cleaner and easier to understand. The last thing I want to do is I want to prompt ChatGPT to identify any key concerns or anomalies for this data set that I could report to management. So it gives me some discussion of what the key concerns and anomalies are in overhead expenses, talks about things like concentration of labor costs, new vendors that are rapidly becoming high spend, significant growth in spending with other vendors, and maybe some substitution. Yours probably comes up with some different